Hello folks, this is Chaz. I am standing here looking at a 20-inch pecan bowl. Well, it was 20 inches. When I originally rough turned it, the video I did was just a quick time-lapse video of this bowl being roughed out, and it was posted I think mid-January of 2012. So you can go back and look at that if you want to see how this thing actually got turned originally. But it's dried for 3 years now, which I think is enough. In the process, it has shrunk a little bit. It's now about 19 and a half by about 18 and a half. The bark appears to have stayed on fairly well. Some of these areas, actually, the bark had already come off when I originally rough turned it. It has one other issue, which is going to make it interesting turning today, and that is it's got a nice crack running through the bottom. It runs through the tenon and out the other side. This was a big pecan crotch, and you can see it. There was a little bit of a bark inclusion there in the crotch, and that's where the crack originated. Now I think that I'll be able to turn that away because there's no evidence of that crack on the inside of the bowl. So I'm not sure how the shape is going to work. You know, when I originally turned this bowl, I undercut the rim quite a bit, hoping for an undercut final shape, but because now it's much wider than it is long in this dimension, then I'm not sure how far into that undercut I'll actually, or how close I'll be getting to that, so that should be kind of interesting. So again, I don't know what's going to happen here, how this thing's going to end up, but I intend to put it on the lathe and turn it. I'll do most of this in time lapse, just because you guys have seen most of these techniques before anyway, so I'll try to burn through this one a little quicker. Alright guys. Alright, well, it's for the most part turned. So big I can't really get it in the shot unless I back way off from it, but as you guys saw, it took quite a bit of work to get this severe undercut. I mean that follows the outside profile pretty well. There, the wall thickness is about 1/2 inch. In here, you might be able to see it pretty well right there. I threw everything at the kitchen sink at that inside curve. And really, the only thing that ended up working was my good old Ellsworth signature bowl gouge. So I had to get up in there pretty deep. It was a little scary. Ended up, rather than trying to cut it, I ended up basically just shear scraping the inside line, and that gave me a finish that I think is smooth enough that I could probably start my sanding at about 120, hopefully. So, profile I think looks pretty good. For being something that's so severely undercut, it wasn't too awful bad. The bark held on here really well. Really surprised. This is a piece of pecan, and you can see that there are some really large openings here in the bark, but it held up. So now I'll at least put the first sanding on it before I knock off on this bowl, and see what I can make that center look like. Got really nice crotch figure in there, and the cracks on the backside really only came through just in a couple of spots. On the backside it ran just all the way through here. So, all right, well, I'll go back to time lapse and do a little sanding. Alright, so I've got the bowl sanded to about 150 now, and looks like all of the bark is hanging on, which is nice. The bark inclusion, you can see, is right at the surface. All in all, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. As far as the shape. Now the foot, I'm going to leave just about the size you see here. It's about 4 inches or so, which will give it enough of a base to sit on. It's a pretty heavy bowl. Most of the weight's going to be centered in the middle here. So I think that should be enough. I may take it down just a little bit, which will widen it out another 1/2 inch or so. Just kind of get it down into this area. But that will be probably tomorrow. Folks, so the bowl has been turned and has been sanded. Sanded it to 400 on the outside and the inside. And now it is time to get that tenon off the bottom. So I will show you how I would normally do that. I take the bowl off, and I've got a little plate here. I put that plate in the chuck, give me some nice surface area, kind of a rough surface. This is not sanded, so it's kind of rough. Take a piece of foam or a piece of shelf liner, put it on there. Bring my tailstock up. I left my center mark there on the tenon when I turned the tenon. Okay, so I've got the tailstock up, and normally I would just turn this thing off, leave a little bit of a nub there, and then knock that off and power sand it. But I've got a better technique for doing that now, so I'll go ahead and kick into time lapse. I'll take the nub down the way I normally would, and then I'll show you this new technique. Okay, so I've got the tenon turned down to basically a little post here. This is the way I normally would do it, and I would just come in here. I would cut that with a thin parting tool, try to get it down as small as I can, then sand, take this thing off a lathe, pop that little nub off, and then power sand the rest of that away. But in this case, I've got a little different option now with this new piece of equipment, and I'll show you how that works. This new piece of equipment is actually called a CenterSteady, and it replaces the live center in the tailstock with this device. It's got a number 2 Morse taper, goes right into the tailstock, and then these 2 wheels. You've seen these kind of wheels before on steady rests. They're, you know, soft rubber, and they'll just keep the bowl pressed against the faceplate, and then it allows me to go up in here and actually turn away that nub. So I'll go ahead and get the CenterSteady installed. It'll take just a couple of minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and do that in time lapse, and then reposition the camera and let you see how I turn that off and sand. Okay? Okay, so I've got the CenterSteady in place, and I've just sort of manually centered the bowl, just looking for wobble in this nub. You can see the wheels rotating. There's quite a bit of pressure now holding the bowl against the faceplate. I'm still going to take nice light cuts as I turn this nub away. I just don't want to get a catch and put too much torque on the thing and have it, you know, slip or spin out. But as long as I'm careful and use light cuts, I don't anticipate any problems with that. And then I'll be able to go in here and sand. I can back the tool rest out a little bit and sand. As long as I don't get into this bottom wheel with my sandpaper, then I'll be okay. The bottom wheel will actually pull the sandpaper out of your hand, so you got to be kind of careful about that. But let's go ahead. I'll do this in real time and let you guys see how this works. All right, so let's just bring the lathe up to speed. Check my tool rest might be just a little bit high, so I'm going to lower it as much as I can. There we go. Don't want to get my tool rest into that wheel. Again, I'm taking very light cuts. I don't want to put any undue pressure on this thing since it's just being held in place by these two wheels. This is a piece of seasoned pecan, and it is it's very hard. And as you can see, it's got this big bark inclusion running through it, which opens up and is going to offer a really good opportunity to get a catch there. So I'm taking extremely light cuts and working it really slowly. So you can see the way that bark inclusion ran through there. This would have been a pretty dangerous piece to turn just using the standard method that I normally use, which is just the tailstock pressing in and turning down to that little post. That post could have very well disintegrated on me before I was ready for it to come off. So in this way, I don't have to worry about it at all. So at this point, I've got the tool turned almost on its side here, and I'm really just shear scraping the wood away. I don't want to go in and try to take an actual cut for fear of getting a catch. So I'm just very slowly shear scraping that the center material out. Okay, the bulk of the nub is gone now. So now I'm really just concerned more with the contour here. It's still raised up just a little bit. It's a little bit of a bumpy ride because of the that big bark inclusion. But I'm going to go ahead and take this down just a little bit more and then provide just sort of a gentle undercut here. Looks like the shape is about what I want. Got a few tool marks in there, so just a couple of light shear scrapes and I should be able to remove those and be ready to sand. Alright, so I think the remainder of that I should be able to get with my sandpaper. Yeah. So now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this gouge. Back the tailstock out a little bit, let you have a better look at the actual surface here. So again, if I get into this point with my finger or my sandpaper, that bottom wheel is just going to take it out of my hand. So we need to stay, I'm going to put the tool rest back in place just as a guide to keep me from going too low there and getting into that. So the tool rest itself will become my safety rail to keep me out of that lower wheel. Okay, so I'm just going to sand in this area above the center line. Got a little piece of 220 sandpaper here, and I'm going to fold it just so that I don't have any weird corners trying to get down there. Really, that bark inclusion is really tricky to sand. It wants to pull that sandpaper out of my hand. Take a look. Got a few tool marks right in that area. I can get out, I believe, pretty easily here. It's looking pretty good. One little mark there. This is a big pecan crotch that has been drying for about 3 years. I originally turned it about this time of the year, about 3 years ago. And it's taken it quite a while to dry. but now that it's dry, it's really tough, very hard. All right. Get a little air and blow that out. Like that. Go in there, a little 320 now. If I can stay out of that bark inclusion. This would be a tough thing to power sand too with the bark inclusion. Tear the sanding pads right up. All right, a little more compressed air. I'm gonna come in with a piece of 400 grit wet or dry. Just so I can match the rest of the finish. Okay. All right, I think that looks good. So pull my tool rest out of the way. Be really careful where I grab this bowl. I've got that bark all the way around it. Let that fan shut off. And then we back the tailstock away. And I've got a nice finished foot. So we've got a nice smooth foot turned. I didn't have to power sand anything off the lathe. It was done when it came off the lathe. And it's got a nice shape. The bowl managed to keep this bark on there, keep that from flying apart, which is really cool because it's very airy. And thanks to the CenterSteady, I was able to turn it start to finish on the lathe and avoid that power sanding. I would have had to put this thing on its face somewhere along the line, on my leg or something, to sand that nub off the bottom anyway, which would have been tough on the bark. I'm going to put a little oil on this so you can see how this pecan really pops, and then we're going to call this one done. All right, so there it is. It started off as roughly a 20-inch bowl, and after it dried and I turned it back around and then went in and undercut it, turned it to its final dimensions, it's really more like about 18. Got some beautiful figure in here, that crotch figure from the pecan tree, and it's got a really interesting inclusion that runs all the way through the bottom of the piece. It's stable, it's not going to go anywhere. I was spinning this thing at speeds of up to 1200 RPM and it didn't fly apart, so that's good. 20-inch pecan bowl, heavily undercut, very interesting profile. As usual, thanks for watching.